Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop, all the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Welcome to an Inside Scoop special. My name is Hina Kazmi. Our topic today is the intersection of energy and space. The energy sector is the backbone infrastructure that literally powers most of the economic activities in every corner of the globe. And energy consumption has been steadily rising. According to a World Economic Forum report published last month, overall global demand for energy is projected to increase by 50% annually in the next 5 years than it has been on average for past 10 years. The key driver for this demand is data centers. About 50% of overall energy consumption is going into maintaining and operating these data centers. The centers are a byproduct of our digital economy that is highly data intensive. Yes, data centers are where everyone's data in the cloud sit. And with AI and generative AI, the demand for energy is exponentially growing. Along with it, government policies have been also focused on reducing the reliance on fossil fuels and have incentivized electrification of goods and services like electric vehicles and all kinds of appliances and machineries used for residential and commercial purposes. To quote the World Economic Forum report, the age of electricity has arrived. So to meet the immense energy demand, nations have been investing in renewable energy infrastructures like solar and wind farms, and in recent years on developing compact nuclear reactor power plants, namely small modular reactors. However, the story gets more complicated because now with every new way of generating power grids are being overloaded and becoming bottlenecks for transmission of electricity. Interestingly, in parallel, the commercial space economy has been booming since the turn of the 21st century as well. It is increasingly affordable to build space hardware, launch satellites, and thus making space as a new domain for critical infrastructure, such as broadband access. So, can space also serve as a resource to meet the energy demand and possibly easing the burden on grids and other resources here on Earth? We will discuss this newly emerging topic with my guest, Richard Kauzlarich. He is a distinguished professor at George Mason University's Schar School of Policy and Government. He teaches courses on geopolitics of energy security and is a co-director of Center for Energy Science and Policy at George Mason. Previously, Professor Kauzlarich served in the office of the Director of National Intelligence, ODNI, and prior to that, he had a 32-year career in foreign service, and he has served as the U.S. Ambassador to Bosnia, Herzegovina, and Azerbaijan. I am honored to have you as my guest, Professor Kauzlarich.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and it's an exciting topic to talk about at a very dynamic time.
I hope I have done justice to your introduction since you have such an impressive, long resume. Yeah. So definitely you are the right person to talk about this hot topic, the energy sector. Now, I just gave a very quick synopsis, 100,000 feet level of broad, about the energy sector. But walk us through maybe at a somewhat of a lower level as to, before we talk about space and data centers, which is a really hot topic these days, walk us through as to what about the dynamics of the space sector? Why are we here now possibly talking about going into space as a resource? What has been happening in the industry sector? So kind of give us a sense of that, yes.
Yeah, well, the whole series of developments that you described take place in a very turbulent world. We've seen in our own country the priorities of the administration shift from the previous administration. The importance of electricity, I think you put your finger on the key point here. When we talk about energy and as citizens, the first thing we think about is, are the lights going to be on? Is there going to be a storm, as we had 2 weeks ago, where we had to worry about electricity going out? We've gone from thinking about electricity as something that was just going to be there all the time to now it's a limited quantity, so important for our economy and our daily lives, but now there are constraints on its availability. And we have to be thinking creatively about the future, how we use electricity, how we deal with demands such as data centers, and look for new alternatives, some of which may be outer space based, to deal with the challenges that are connected with data center operation in particular.
So in your career, I mean, as you teach geopolitics and energy, tell us like what are the evolution over the decades you've seen, even in your diplomat days, even like.
We've gone to thinking about energy from oil and gas. That's kind of the traditional concept. And when we talked about geopolitics of energy, it was the Middle East, basically. Now we're talking about new forms of energy, renewable energy that require these critical minerals. And the shift has been made from thinking just about the Middle East to thinking about Africa, Latin America, even the United States for these sources. And it keeps coming back to the question of energy. How can these commodities now make electricity more accessible for commercial use, but also for our own personal use. And that I think is what makes this a particularly important issue. We talk about geopolitics, now we have to talk about geotechnology. Small modular reactors.
Yes.
Space-based systems, which may or may not have an immediate impact, but over time, if we do not pay attention to them, we are not doing our job, if you will, as people involved in public policy in the United States.
And we are definitely, I mean, there's so much to unpack here. And frankly, as I was preparing for our interview session today, it was really, it's overwhelming almost. I was having a sensory overload to say, which are the policy areas and that we should really focus on. But there's a lot here to unpack, and we should get into some of the overall policy concerns. But let me, I wanted to say, you mentioned Middle East, right? So definitely we see a very conscious, intentional transition in the Middle East region, the Gulf regions, where they are pivoting to other alternate sources of energy and other markets that they want to get into, where up to now oil was the main source of economic activities and revenues.
Right.
So a very time for changes. We are in Virginia, and of all the places, Virginia is perhaps where we feel the most about the data centers. So in my introduction, I talked about data center, and I think we're going to spend time talking about it today. I actually was surprised to learn that how much, of all the states, Virginia has the largest number of data centers by a lot. So the next state is Texas, and then California third in as far as number of data center infrastructure and facilities in states. So this is a near and dear issue to us in Virginia for sure.
Well, George Mason University is a public university in the Commonwealth, and our first order of business, I think, is looking at challenges facing the state. I mean, Virginia is at the heart of these developments that we're talking about, both land-based data centers, but also new space activities that people are thinking about. Commercial interest is growing in both of those areas, and so Virginia becomes, very much at the core of this. Virginia gets most of its energy from other states. We import electricity. It's not as if we are meeting the demand for these data centers, and so regional cooperation between Virginia and the neighboring states who are in this PJM regional transmission authority is very important. But I think more to the point of the data centers, we have to recognize that we're in a different phase than we were 5 years ago. At that time, somebody would come to the local governments in Loudoun and Prince William County with an idea to build a data center, and it would just sort of sail through without any questions. Mm-hmm. Now the public is asking a lot of questions about what is the impact, environmental impact, the impact of demands for water, and higher energy prices that people pay as a result of this increased presence of these data centers.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
No.
Yeah.
So the public policy issue now is, this isn't just a commercial relationship between the data centers and the power generators and transmitters. It's a social contract, in a sense, with the communities that are around these facilities now. And people are asking some very, very hard questions.
I read a political report on this and how there are, for sure, we know the energy bills, our bills, our monthly bills, utility bills are rising. Yeah. Now, and then another thing that I want to get to is about the kind of the health concerns because of the number of, if you're living within the vicinity of these data centers. But before that, the energy costs going up because of, now we're attributing this in some of our counties directly to data centers. Is that indeed the fact? And is it because we are importers of energy rather than exporters? Is that what's going on?
Well, I think it's easy to blame data centers because they're very visible and all the attention that's been given to them in recent years. It's not just that. I mean, we demand more electricity as individual citizens of the Commonwealth, whether to heat our homes or to power if we have an EV car. There are other industries out there that use a lot of power. We don't know yet what quantum computing, for example, is going to mean for energy demand. And there's also the question of crypto demands for energy as well. So you have to look at this in a broader context. And energy bills are rising throughout the country. Yeah. How much is directly attributable to the data centers, I think, is one of those metrics that we really have to dig into to really understand.
So I think it's interesting how, like you said, the data centers were the darling of our state and a really good source of revenue. But now the increased existence of them and adding new data centers is really creating a community concerns, as you said. We will come back. We will take a short break and come back and continue discussions on data centers and talk about going into space with them.
It's a beautiful day out here. Sunny today with light breezes, giving way to clouds in the afternoon. We could see some light precipitation to moderate precipitation later on, followed by powerful storm-like conditions. 90 miles per hour winds are expected. Authorities are asking everyone, stay indoors. Come on, that's it. Let's go.
Oh, Dad, wait till you see the bike we got for Jake.
Hearing loss happens gradually with age, making it easy to ignore. Yet most older Americans aren't getting their hearing tested. Untreated hearing loss can keep your loved ones from enjoying what they cherish most.
Dad, can you hear me?
Don't let that happen. Speak up about hearing loss. You'll be glad you did.
You can't buy a best friend. You can love them, pet them, care for them, whether they want you to or not. You can take a picture, you can jump, yell, you can fly to the moon, travel the world, or just stay in bed. You can't buy a best friend like that, but you can adopt one. 'Cause we're connected.
Cook foods to the right temperature using a food thermometer. 3,000 Americans will die from food poisoning this year. Keep your family safer. Check your steps at foodsafety.gov.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
I'm your host, Hina Kazmi, joined by my guest, Professor Kauzlarich from George Mason University. So, Professor, before the break, we just started talking about data centers and what a load they are, no pun intended, on just the energy demand. And so, help us really understand kind of, I know we're going to talk about this, it's really a new topic that because of the resources that data centers require, we should look at another way of operating and maintaining them. But what are the resources required? Before the break, we talked about our energy bills are going up, but really, what is the pull on them? Is it regulatory concerns? Is it really the pull on the transmission capacity? What are we talking about?
Well, you know, you have this fundamental tension between this region being kind of the data center capital of the world, if you want to think in those terms, and the physical limits on power generation. You know, we simply do not have an unending source of energy. We've seen shortages develop where there had to be cutbacks in power available. We've obviously seen disruptions by storms in particular, but there are physical limits on the power system, and the demands for more power require not just production of energy, but the transmission of energy. And as people do not want data centers in their backyard, they don't want large pylons for transmitting electricity in their backyard. So you're starting to get the pushback that's going to cause people to ask, are there aspects of data center development and use that can be, if you will, offshored into space as one alternative, and deal with these really serious questions that relate to land use, relate to the limits on terrestrial resources that are necessary to develop data centers, and can some of these, in a sense, take advantage of the technological developments that are implied by these proposals that have come from Google, from Elon Musk, from Jeff Bezos, for space-based systems. Now, you know the problems of space, and data doesn't move in the same way that it does through fiber cables in the U.S. So there are limits on this, and you wouldn't be able to basically take all of the data centers that we have here in this area and put them into space. But there are things that, and it's not just in theory, things that can be done in space that would help address the challenges here. But when you start doing that, you raise a whole new set of issues for regulation, dare I say, international diplomacy in terms of use of outer space, and the technological challenges that are going to be associated with space development. Obviously, you need less cooling for a space-based system. You don't need as much backup power in terms of diesel and other backup systems on land-based. But you have, as I said, you have other challenges that are associated with. So why is this important now? Well, I think we need to start looking at what are those policy issues, what are the needs for governance of systems and the means that the information is being transmitted, and then the other environmental challenges that may be associated with developments in space as
yeah.
compared to
Yeah.
Earth-bound ones.
So I do want to definitely talk about how there definitely are no shortage of skeptics about data centers in space anytime soon. And yes, fair enough, there are definitely, I would imagine, various level of technical challenges to develop and build and launch these data centers in space. While the launch and launching satellites and just access to space is a lot affordable now than it was 20 years ago. Still, we're talking about a lot of 50 kilowatts per rack kind of a power worth of data centers, that servers that need to go up in space to maintain these infrastructure at the level that these data centers have now. So it is a long-term plan, I would imagine. So I know there's several startups already seriously looking into it, and not just startups, of course, SpaceX. Elon has announced it, and he's seriously pursuing it. We know that other big tech companies, like you mentioned, are pursuing it. But I would say we're probably still a few years away before we actually fully deploy it in space. Would you agree?
I agree, but the pressure's building because now you visit a data center in our area, and you see these large buildings with racks of servers, and those servers may be owned by 2, 3, 4 different companies. Well, now you're getting the hyperscale requirements for data centers, where Amazon is not just interested in 1, 2 racks in a building. They want the whole facility for themselves, and that puts strains on the system, transmitting power to keep the servers going, and it's a requirement that's going to come all at once. It's not going to be spread over time. And the more of these hyperscale projects that come, the greater the public reaction is going to be. We're seeing it already in other parts of the country where people are basically saying we will not have data centers in Illinois or wherever they're.
I think there was the latest report I saw was in Tucson, where the town of Tucson actually turned down the proposal for a new data center there. So it's definitely public is reacting.
And this is going to push the reaction of policymakers to think about alternatives to the traditional pattern that's been developed. It's easy to not take these kind of ambitious projects in space seriously because of all the problems. But on the other hand, things are happening on the ground that are going to force policymakers to look at other solutions.
Now, I do want to say, while I think you are absolutely right, the long-term plan, and this is going to happen. The data centers will be deployed in space at some level, and I think we're headed that way. I do know that a lot of the big tech companies, Googles and Amazons, to support the energy demand for their data centers, they are investing in their own renewable energy, like whether solar farm or wind farm, just to support and power their data centers. But I guess that's still not enough to alleviate public's concern because of what?
Well, it doesn't help because it adds additional concerns over and above what are already there. We're seeing a lot of interest in natural gas as a local source of energy for these larger data centers. That's fairly obvious as a short-term solution. Small modular reactors, these are still several years into the future, and we still don't have an operating system yet in the United States. So people are looking at the timelines that are associated with the need for power in the short term versus the longer term process of coming up with these alternative sources, whether they're renewable or nuclear based.
So it was an interesting kind of explanation and that I read in the International Energy Agency's report, and it mentions about really the future is going to be space resources, and I want to get more into another source of way of getting energy from space. But it also talks about decentralized sources of energy, meaning those big heavy users like data centers or the big techs, they can maybe have their own little local energy generation systems, and really and what they call decentralized source of energy, and that could apply to globally in other sectors, especially a lot of the rural areas. But I think what I didn't understand, again, we keep coming back to the same topic, is that the transmission. So we still have the centralized grid system. Exactly. And so is there a way to decentralize even that? But maybe that's even a longer, more ambitious idea than going in space.
Well, this is what makes this an interesting public policy issue. I mean, electricity was pretty boring until very recently. I mean, it really wasn't a very exciting area, but now it's become very, very dynamic, and it's not just a question of data centers demanding power, but if these larger centers begin to have their own source of energy, they may not need all the energy that they've built capacity for, so they need to sell that back. That's into the main system. Well, that raises a whole new set of problems that, both from a public point of view, but also from the point of view of the operators of the system, there's going to have to be some really, really hard thinking and involving all of the stakeholders that are affected by these developments, the data center owners, the public, the people who are responsible for the transmission, and those who are actually producing the energy, whether it's on the island of the data center or for the system as a whole.
What are the major energy providers? Let's say our Dominion or PG&E. I'm thinking of in New Jersey and even in West Coast. I guess what are their policy? What are their strategy? How are they working, collaborating with the big tech companies on these problems? Yeah.
Well, and on small modular reactors, for example,
that's right.
Dominion has large reactors here in the Commonwealth, and one of the ideas that is being discussed is putting a small modular reactor at one of the locations, whether Lake Anna or Surrey, I think it's the other one. We're seeing in other states, 3 Mile Island is coming back online.
I heard that, yes.
And it is going to be a source of energy for data centers and the public.
Okay. Yes, I think that is going to be really interesting, and we also should talk about our 3 Mile Island, but quantum computing, just to add to the fun of energy demand. We'll be right back after this break. Thank you.
Every day across America, excess food is gathered by a network of good people at local food banks, giving hope to millions of children who struggle with hunger. They've earned their wings, and you can too. Together, we can solve child hunger. Support Feeding America and your local food bank at feedingamerica.org.
Hi, I'm Josh Temple. You might have seen me on TV where I help folks turn their houses into dream homes. But forget construction. Parenting is the toughest job there is. So when you need help or advice, turn to the parenting experts at Boys Town.
I was afraid of that.
Well, guess it's time to get you fixed.
Your pets will start fooling around sooner than you think.
Go on, get out of here!
Accidental litters lead to millions killed in shelters each year. Help prevent more. Fix at month 4.
food. It nourishes, brings us together, and adds flavor to life. That's why it's important to wash hands, surfaces, and fresh produce. Keep raw meat, poultry, and seafood separate from ready-to-eat foods like fruits and vegetables. And cook to proper temperatures using a food thermometer. Enjoy, and refrigerate leftovers within 2 hours. For more tips on safely preparing foods, visit homefoodssafety.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back. I'm Hina Kazmi, joined by my guest tonight, Rich Kazlarich, professor and co-director of Center for Energy Science and Policy at George Mason University. So, Professor Kauzlarich, before our break, we were talking about quite a bit about the data centers, and really we're seeing a need to take them off the grid and really take away their burden for communities, and space seems to be the option, one avenue, and really we know that Elon Musk talked about it at the World Economic Forum in Davos last month, so this has become really in the headline news. Another thing but I guess what I should say is that given the technology and capabilities where we are, the best projections are that we're about at least 10 years away from where we can really be fully have that capability and have really those data centers operated in space. So in the meantime, there are other ways. I know space as a domain is being looked at very closely about fulfilling our demand for energy consumption globally. And one of the things is the energy solar farms in space, and directing that solar energy from space to ground to just really fill in the demand. And it is the same idea as solar farms on Earth, but now we have the technology, capability again, and flexibility to really install and deploy these large solar farms, which could be a mile or two long, of square mile of size in space. Your thoughts on it? Are you looking forward to this, or yeah?
Well, I think that, for people who are proponents of renewable energy on the Earth, anything that sort of expands the technological base for solar applications in space has the capability of lessons learned, if not actual new products that can be used for solar power in Earth. That would be my first interest in terms of how do we capture the obvious technological need for solar power in space-based systems and use that in developing land-based systems. That would be number one. If we want to go even further and talk about lunar settlements and the power that would be required for that development to take place. Again, there's the lessons learned, the technology that you would have to use both solar and nuclear that could be, again, applied back on Earth-based developments. Now, these are even further down the line, but it's this kind of thing we really, we can't simply walk away from because it seems like so far in the future. These are developments that have immediate application, and no one imagined that AI would have the impact that it has just 5 years ago.
Even 5, yes, absolutely.
And so, I think it's, it may seem far in the future, but we sometimes surprise ourselves with these technological developments. So I think we have to be thinking now about what are the policy implications, because we have a merger and integration of AI developments and power developments that are going to be driving how we look for alternative sources and how that technology might be used both to increase the productivity of existing power systems, whether they're space-based or land-based, and not just as a kind of a source of demand for power.
So I think all these options that we're talking about of space-based capabilities for energy to meet our energy demand, the solar farms in the spaces actually, like you said, are already in development. I know China is really focused on it. They're deploying some test prototypes, not the full 1 square mile that I already mentioned, but really to that, okay, how do we scale up? So I think all of these capabilities are being developed and slowly will be scaled up. And yeah, we are probably 8 to 10 years away at least from those, but I think they're all in work. So, and I guess we should just touch on this. We won't go into detail of it, but the quantum computing, right?
Yeah.
I think that is on the horizon, and that is going to just magnificently enhance our capability and demand for data. It doesn't necessarily shrink the demand for data centers. It actually just enhances it in a different way. So we're only going to be needing more and more energy to support these data demands and data centers. Yeah. So as you talk about, we need to be thinking about policy and regulations. Give us a sense of what is it that, what exactly specific, what area would you say? Is it, for example, is it about, hey, we need to have some budgetary priorities to invest in R&D for some of these space-based capabilities that we've been talking about? Or is it regulatory aspects that you're talking about, or all of the above?
Yeah. Let me just come back to the China piece, because it's so important here. I mean, the competitor, if you will, for our policy objectives in both AI and power is China. Yes. And what they do, you know, they have obviously a totally different system of government, and what takes 10 years for us to do because of regulatory hurdles, they can compress in half the time or less. But I think the incentive that the Chinese developments provide for the U.S. will mean that we are going to have to put more resources to helping, particularly develop these space-based systems. So what are the kinds of challenges that I think we can start to look at from a policy point of view? You know, we can't really wait to deploy these massive systems. I mean, Elon Musk has talked about 1 million satellites, and that may be unreasonable to expect. But you know, you can kind of prototype some of these things, and that includes prototype the kinds of regulations that you need. This whole regulatory sandbox approach, which I'm just beginning to learn about, but you know, it may be possible if you have the resources, the willingness of regulators at both the state and the national level, and the operators of data centers and power systems kind of getting together on a no-fault basis and saying, what if we took a portion of the data center requirement and put it in space? What would be necessary for that to happen? And how could we create a commercially viable system that we could test, beta test, basically? Exactly. That, to me, is something that a university like George Mason, or working with other universities in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we should begin to be thinking about, seeing if we can't find the appropriate use of these regulatory sandboxes to sort of get people together before you try to build these systems into space and say, this might work, this won't work, and it can be done on a no-fault basis.
So I definitely want to come back to what is all the efforts and things that are happening at your center and in general at George Mason. But before we get into that, I do want to basically, I think you said something really important that I just want to emphasize, is that up to now, when we think of space and space capabilities and launching assets in space, satellites in space, really it's like those space companies. But right now, I think in the interest of the energy sector, what you really are saying is, hey, we have other stakeholders who are usually are now playing in this arena, and now they need to be part of the discussion. Right. So you mentioned, just not just Dominion Energy, PJM. And by the way, PJM is describe for our audience, that is Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland.
It's
the actually.
I can't even remember how many states now are
13.
involved.
I think 13.
I was going to say 12, but I knew it was up there. But we have these regional transmission organizations throughout the United States, and it's divided, who knows, on what basis. But regionally they cooperate. When there's a power outage, they can move power, in a sense, from one state to another. And
I'm sorry to interrupt, but is that what's called like a smart grid or management? Is that what they're doing when in those events, or maybe something else?
Well, it's kind of management, I guess. It's grid. Cooperative agreements where you're prepared to allow power from your state to go to another state because of disruptions. Texas stands alone because they have their own system, and it goes with the territory. But these become the framework for talking about, if we're going to pull some of these data center demands out of the system, then we're going to have to make adjustments for the system, whether it's space-based or some other locally based source of power. This is a big management issue, and states now are increasingly putting pressure on these regional arrangements to make sure that the cost of serving these data centers is borne by the data center and not by the public as a whole. So this is a very, very complex area of government regulation.
So what is the overarching federal body that ought to oversee, like you said, all the strategy and working with the space companies also, and just really, for the long-term energy demand and just planning for it? Is it the Department of Energy who should oversee this coordination? What are your thoughts?
Well, I don't know that we've got a mechanism that can kind of pull the power piece and the space piece together. We have at the national level, the Trump administration wants to concentrate more of that authority in the hands of federal authorities. I don't know that they've thought through exactly where that should be. Historically, this has been done at the state level. And so this is going to be a real public policy challenge to figure out how do you balance the responsibilities and interests of individual states and the appropriate concerns at the national level to make sure that power is available, not just that you have a source of power, but you have the transmission system that allows the power to be moved from producer to consumer.
Exactly. So like you said, those regions that manage the transmission of power, this has to be a lot of coordinated effort. So a lot to think about here and bringing those stakeholders together. When we come back, we will go into our final segment and talk about some international policies for moving data centers in space. We'll be right back.
Nice going, Spencer! I can't believe we broke Old Man Hennessy's window.
Correction, dude. You broke. I just threw the ball.
This is really bad. What are we gonna do?
We? Go to the door, ask for the ball back.
Are you serious?
It's my ball, Myrtleback.
You're so dead. I'd run away.
Yeah, to Uruguay.
Kiss your life goodbye. Sorry.
Let's go.
See you, dude.
See ya. Remember me and your well.
Nice one. Some friends you are.
Hi. Tell him it was an accident. And we can fix the window. Come on. I'll come with you.
Loyalty. Pass it on.
You go first.
A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
top of my seat.
A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back. I am here with my guest, Professor Kauzlarich of George Mason University. Professor, so in the last segment, we should talk about here as to, we talked about a lot of domestic policies and regulations, who should oversee this kind of new coordination, and how do we scale up in space for these capabilities. So we probably should now talk about anything going in space. We naturally have to think about international space laws. Right. We can't evade those. They're important. They're treaties, decades-old treaties that we all live by. We register our assets to launch anything in orbit. It seems that what Elon said, that to put his data centers in space, we're talking about up to 1 million small satellites in low Earth orbits. That is tremendous scaling up from thousands, which alone itself is stretching the legal system, but really going up to millions. This is something obviously unprecedented. And how does the international community and those treaties handle this is a challenge, going to be a challenge, because one of the core provisions in the national space laws are that those assets launched from the country that they're launched from, or for example, SpaceX is a U.S. base, so it's the U.S. laws that govern the operation and everything to do with those assets in space, in addition to international treaties, of course. But now with this kind of scaling up, it's really there's a lot of gray now. Who really is the owner of those assets? Increasing all these assets in space, orbital debris has been a major concern for many policymakers. So share with me your thoughts on this. Where do you see this going?
Well, back to my former life as a diplomat, I think what's striking about this era of space interest is we have these hyperscale companies which are capable of, dreaming about and maybe even launching 1 million satellites. That's something we didn't have to worry about in the past. Space was something that was regulated between governments in treaties and other international understandings. Now you have commercial actors that are going to be playing a role, and that's going to make regulation much more difficult. One aspect of all of this that I'm very concerned about are the vulnerabilities from a cybersecurity point of view that these multiple space-based systems pose, both for, if you were putting data centers in space, but more generally about the vulnerability from a national security point of view. If our own national security establishment depends on these systems as well. So I think this is really going to be, again, it's something we should be thinking about now, right? Because I don't think the large companies are going to go away. They're going to be actors in this area for a long time. I think we have to think about China and India.
And India, yeah.
Here you have two countries that over this period that we're talking about are only going to become more active and capable. And whatever our geopolitical conflicts may be with either of those, we're going to have to cooperate. And we know how difficult it was to negotiate the Law of the Sea Agreement, which the United States has not signed up to this point. But now you're seeing in pursuit of critical minerals, companies that are going to be capable of doing things that when that agreement was put together, we only thought about governments because they were going to regulate what their economic interests are. So this is, I'm not a lawyer. I'm a diplomat by training and practice, and I just see a need for more diplomacy, more international cooperation, different kinds of cooperation, maybe involving private sector interests in this. The environmental piece is really exciting from a policy point of view, because one of the justifications for moving these systems into space is that you avoid the environmental problems on Earth. Well, maybe you've created a new environmental problem that is going to require someone to take responsibility for. And when it's not a government, then you've got a different kind of challenge than you do.
I think you are raising some very, very important points. You know, one of the demands for energy is also population-based, not just data centers and technology-based. And India and China being the biggest two nations in terms of population, obviously the demand needs for them are going to be accordingly. So you're absolutely right. They are a significant player in all of these dialogues. And you know, let's talk about the environmental concerns. So yes, you know, if we think for a moment that, oh, let's take all our assets to space, space is really big, but it almost, you know, if it sounds too good to be true, yes, there are some drawbacks, there are some challenges, which is really, and this is an emerging issue that at least I'm aware of, and I'm not an expert, so please, if you have any thoughts on this, that as we launch all these numbers, thousands and thousands of small low Earth orbit constellations, and they have short lifespans, so they are recycled, let's say, in 3 to 5 years period, and in that they're supposed to burn up in the upper atmosphere, and so we launch more assets in orbit. But what the environmentalists now and scientists are looking at is that what is the impact of all these numbers of satellites and debris burning up in upper atmosphere is doing to the ozone layer. That's a thin layer, we know, that protects us from the radiation and everything from in the dark part of the space, and just protects our environment. So that is an emerging issue that's coming up, and you know, like, this was never considered, right? Like, we did not see this coming, but here we are. So you're absolutely right that policymaker, regulators, scientists, like, we really need to bring the government as critical stakeholders, because companies will do what they need to do to expand their economic potential. We as end users want our data. So let's be honest, we are very much part of this as a general public. But the regulators and scientists really play that crucial role too, in the interest of the public, would you say?
Right, exactly, exactly. And that, we have to keep coming back to that public interest piece, because it's, in a sense, it's easy to ignore until the problems arise. And you don't want to wait until we do have a space debris issue that causes environmental concerns. We need to be thinking about it now.
So before we run out of time, I definitely want to come back and talk about the activities that are going on at George Mason University and at your center. So we have about 2.5 minutes, so please, I know.
Well, let me just kind of focus in on one aspect that we really haven't talked about, but where the university can play a very important role. There's a pacing factor here, where the technology that we've been talking about is deployed much more rapidly than people can be trained to use and operate. And so, you know, we need engineers and operators, we need regulators and inspectors, we need people who can do the maintenance and the technical side, and we need economists and analysts, and that's where the university comes in. And George Mason is in a great position, I think, to help out. Our College of Engineering, Dr. Li-Ling Hong, operates 3 centers that are relevant here, a grid security lab, a center that simulates small modular reactors, and an AI data center lab. The College of Science and the Business School cooperate with SHAR, with our Center for Energy Science and Policy. We've just produced a major study of the Virginia energy situation, and have done work in rural communities to develop climate action plans. And rural communities are going to be the ones that are going to face the brunt of new data center development. So all of these things coming together both as research questions, as policy questions, but also training for the workforce of the future. It's a great time to be part of George Mason.
And I think those labs, I know you had mentioned when we were talking offline, is about how Dr. Hong has been working with some of those small space companies and really working with them on the grid, laying out the grid maybe on the surface of the moon. So there's a lot of that activity going on at George Mason too.
Well, she has a summer boot camp for high school students, and last summer it was looking at microgrids on the moon and microgrids on Earth. And our granddaughter was part of the students who participated in this, so I got to go to a couple sessions. But it's really nice to see reaching out to the younger people who are going to be dealing with the consequences of what we've talked about.
It has been absolutely a pleasure to have this really much needed discussion on what you have called nexus of energy and space. And I think you've pointed out some really important factors, how there's a lot of diverse stakeholders who need to come together and really lay out a strategy and policy and regulatory landscape. Thank you so much, Professor Kauzlarich.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yes. The issues and policy solutions we discussed today are a small part of a much larger global debate on energy consumption, production, transmission, and looking at space as the new domain to potentially solve these very critical resource challenges for our planet. With thousands of satellites in low Earth orbit and potentially scaling up to millions, we are stretching the regulatory and policy framework at a scale never encountered before. And it is evolving at a very fast pace. When and at what scale will the demand for energy and data stabilize? It is very difficult to say at the moment. In the next Inside Scoop special on space policy, we will discuss the legal side of these issues, not just data centers, but really how do nations govern given the reliance on space for critical infrastructure? International space laws were designed for nation states at the dawn of space age nearly 70 years ago, and not for the commercial space economy of today. And thus they seem severely outdated. Because at the end of the day, we have to ensure that policy decisions and international space laws are being amended with considerations for general public, their health and safety, data privacy, cyber and national security, and yes, economic opportunities for all, and not just for a handful of big businesses or advanced nations. I look forward to the next Inside Scoop special. In the meantime, please make sure to join Inside Scoop live on Monday evenings at 8 p.m. Thank you.